Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. Today, I am going to share my review of Dr. Grordbort's Scientific Adventure Violence from Crowbar Creative and Exalted Funeral. This is written by T.G. Grackle, Brian Saliba, and Zach Thieler. I apologize, I probably mispronounced at least one of those names. And it is based on the works of Greg Broadmore. This 334-page hardcover with PDF carries an MSRP of $50, or you can grab just the PDF alone for $20. All that said, let's swing on over to the other camera because here I've got Dr. Grordbort's Scientific Adventure Violence. A couple of things I want to mention before we jump on in. First of all, the fine folks over at Crowbar Creative were kind enough to provide me with this review copy. But neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. These days, it's important you know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of this book, but I do want to give you a really good feel for what you're going to find inside this volume. So let's jump on in. First thing I want to do is share the credits because there are actually quite a few artists who took part in this above and beyond Greg Broadmore, who this is, of course, based on his concepts and his artwork and such. So I want to make sure we give some credit there. And this setting, well, it starts off in the late 19th century, and Dr. Grordbort is this amazing inventor and scientist who basically changes the course of human history with his inventions. You see humanity take to the stars and begin colonizing the various different planets in the Milky Way. So the main focus here is on the moon and Mars, Venus, as well as Earth. There's a robot planet with the robots who want to destroy all organic life, which travels around the universe. And we dive into a lot of different factions as well, who are either on Earth or on these various different planets too. So, of course, in the 1880s, Great Britain was the superpower in the world. You know, they ruled the waves and the sun never set on the British Empire. The United States was still a fledgling nation. So the U.S. in this setting is essentially the nation that creates knockoff inventions from Dr. Grordbort's work. So the U.S. will make different items, different gear, gadgets, so on and so forth, but it's not of the quality that you'll find with the British and Dr. Grordbort. Do want to mention, this does take place during a period where you had colonization, misogyny, toxic masculinity. There are a lot of topics that are tackled. Some people are going to find triggering, but I do want to point out, none of that is ever held up in esteem. It is really, this is a satirical kind of setting, and all those things are made fun of. And it's pointed out just how wrong-headed those things also happen to be. Now, I do want to point out that this is built for the 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons rule set. It does point out that the upcoming, not a new edition of D&D is also fine. And this is what's called a reskin. I'm a little surprised by the direction that was taken with Crowbar Creative with Dr. Grordbort's Scientific Adventure Violence, because this is a setting book, this is a source book, but you really have to know the ins and outs of 5e D&D or the upcoming Dungeons & Dragons, which is going to be released later this year. I find it kind of unusual because, as I point out, this is a reskin. So you're going to find that a lot of things that you would normally see in a third-party 5e setting book are not going to be present. So a lot of times we run across things where it basically tells us, well, in the world of Dr. Grordbort, in this setting, what is the equivalency of XYZ from 5e D&D? So as an example, there's a bunch of gear and, like I said, gadgets, weapons, and so forth. So a lot of these, say, as an example, weapons, will actually have different sorts of effects that mirror the spells from Dungeons and Dragons. So rather than actually telling us what these effects are, it just says, oh, well, this piece of gear or this weapon, what have you, can provide these effects. So as the characters level up, they will find that, oh, well, they would have gained this spell. Well, now their piece of equipment can provide that effect. Kind of odd, to be honest. It's kind of an odd approach, and it's not one that we see very often. In fact, to be honest, I've never seen this approach with a third-party product which utilizes Dungeons and Dragons. And once again, you must have at least the SRD for Dungeons and Dragons to use this book. If you have no interest in 5e, then you can't use this book. So either have the 3 core books or have the SRD, because you need that, and you must be familiar with the rules and various aspects of Dungeons and Dragons in order to effectively utilize this book. So as an example, we have the 10 different classes, so we get their equivalency in Dr. Grordbort's. And these are pretty interesting. So as an example, the monk is the automonastic, and you must be a robot in order to be an automonastic. So if you want to play a monk-like character, you have to be a robot. But then the information is pretty light on these. So as an example, the wizard is the boffin. This is kind of flavored text talking about the boffin. And this happens to be a moonling. Then we actually get into the information about the class here and here. And that's it. That's all we get. There's no leveling up information or anything like that. We do get the equivalencies of what happens when you happen to reach this level and you get this ability or gain this spell or what have you. We just get what the equivalency in Dr. Grordbort's happens to be. So we've got the various different classes, and then we will jump on into what really takes up the vast majority of page space, and that is going to be gear. The guns, gadgets, gizmos, and galactic goodies, as well as vehicles. We get rockets. We also have bestiaries that are broken down by planet with various different creatures. I got to say, I love the artwork throughout. I think the production quality of this book is phenomenal. It is so well done, but it's light on some things that I find would be really important. So as an example, and I'll show it to you in just a moment, the Game Master section about running games in this setting is about 9 pages long. So we get all this different gear, and we have the various different items broken down into categories. So as an example, these are light weapons. One thing I find kind of interesting is that you have what's known as a malfunction roll. So a lot of times, especially with the weapons and gear that you would use in combat, it's just going to be your attack roll. And then there will be a range of numbers that if they come up, there's going to be a malfunction starting at 1. So if you roll a 1, rather than having a critical failure, you have a malfunction. And then based on the category that piece of gear falls into, as an example, we have some of the characters who have abilities that mirror spells. We're going to roll malfunctions for those as well. Kind of interesting concept, and I do like it. I think it's pretty wild. And for the most part, you're normally not going to be sitting there rolling multiple dice for the malfunctions and such. Unlike 5e D&D, these abilities that mirror spells, you will have to roll because you have to roll to make sure that you don't have a malfunction. So we've got tons and tons of items and gear and goodies. But I also have to point out, we get our stat block, we get our image. Just about everything gets images except for some minor items. So we have images for a great majority of this, but we don't really get much of an explanation about it. You do see the text here. A lot of times what you'll find is kind of like flavored text, and it's maybe a quotation that's attributed to a fictional person, or it's found in a fictional book and so forth. I got to be honest, a lot of this stuff, I'm not exactly sure how I would necessarily utilize it at the game table. Once again, really cool stuff, really cool items, but I would have liked to have had at least a paragraph or two that kind of explains what this thing is. Now, much of this you can figure out. It's not like you have to be a rocket scientist to understand it. But once again, I just would have liked to have seen things more fleshed out as opposed to just giving me nuts and bolts. I would like to know a little bit more about this, how this is utilized, who utilizes it, and so forth. And our best series sort of the same exact way. So we've got the various different rockets, we've got fighters, we've got transports. So this is jam-packed with goodies. I wish it was less so, is the reality. I would have been more than happy to see fewer weapons and gear and vehicles and so forth, to see things fleshed out, explained a little bit more. Now, as I had mentioned, the Game Master section is really short, starts right here, talking about reskinning and adapting 5e concepts. It also has a little section about what are the sorts of adventures that you're going to have in Dr. Grordbort's, kind of what are some of the themes. We get some plot hooks for the 4 major locations. I should say 5 major locations. I forgot the Earth. And then we get into some unique rare gear. So that was it. That was our Game Master section with advice on running adventures in this setting. Like I said, kind of strange. Then we'll get into our bestiary. And we've got some really cool looking and interesting creatures here. But we sort of see the same approach as we did with the gear, where it's, here's a stat block, here's an ability or multiple abilities that this creature has, actions it may take, and that's it. We don't know really anything else about these things, like what is their habitat, how many do you normally, encounter. It's, like I said, it's kind of strange, the approach that was taken with this book. And if you don't have any experience with the Dr. Grordbort line, I think they're art books. There might be some graphic novels as well. But if you're not familiar with it, a lot of this stuff just kind of leaves you scratching your head. We will get some important NPCs, where here we actually start getting some information. So here we've got like Dr. Grordbort. Who is he? What he likes, what he hates, what he wants, allies, enemies, actions, reactions, legendary actions. This is the kind of layout I would have liked to have seen with the rest of the book, where we get more information about how to utilize the items and creatures and so forth at the game table, where we get that with these important NPCs, these important characters. So we are going to get a bunch of information about important NPCs. We get some common non-player characters, and then we're going to get into our various different tables for the malfunctions, There are quite a few malfunction tables, as you can see. And then we also have information about what spell equivalencies we have here. So as an example, we have Ray of Frost. Well, the Gadgetronic item is the Saturn I-7 Luminiferous Ether Exciter. There you go. We got our index. We'll get some other tables to wrap up. And that is a look inside Dr. Grordbort's Scientific Adventure Violence from Crowbar Creative and Exalted Funeral. Swing on over to the other camera. I'm going to share some final thoughts and give this a review score. I do like this book because I think there's a lot of really cool things in it. I'm just left scratching my head at the direction that was taken as far as presenting this setting. I think it would have been far more useful if we had less as far as the number of items and more as far as descriptive information about them, not only with the gadgets and gear and weapons and vehicles, but also with the creatures in the bestiary. I would have liked to have seen the same approach taken that was used with the NPCs with a lot of the other items in this book. I'm shocked that the actual setting information and game master information combined comes out to maybe 30 pages or so. So not much there either. But like I said, artwork is cool. Production quality of this book is top notch. And there's really wild stuff in here. And the way I kind of look at it is if you're familiar with the old role-playing game, which I think there's still an edition in print through someone, Space 1889, which had sort of the same concept, but it was not satirical in nature, where there's a lot of humor in this book. That's something else I would have liked to have seen maybe a little less of. A little less wink, wink, nudge, nudge. A little more, hey, okay, so what is this thing? But it almost feels like a mashup of Space 1889 and Monty Python. Maybe not as crazy as Monty Python, but it is kind of a humorous, satirical setting, which can be very difficult for some people to pull off. I got to point that out. So really, all in all, I recommend this, but depending on your level of investment in 5e D&D, your mileage is certainly going to vary. There are some people out there that even if they like this concept, if they just don't want to deal with 5e, they're not going to get much use out of this book. And then there's other folks out there who are like, man, I don't care what information is there about the monsters in the bestiary. Just give me the stat block. That's all I care about. Well, they're going to find a lot more use out of this book. I do like it. I do recommend it. It is certainly not going to be for everyone. And I am surprised by the approach that was taken with this supplement. If there had been more books, that's fine. That's kind of what I would have liked to have seen. It just feels like they were trying to cram too much in here, which sometimes isn't a great thing. Also should mention, I don't know how well this is going to be supported. This was a really successful Kickstarter. I believe it's doing very well for Crowbar Creative and Exalted Funeral, but I have not heard anything about adventures or additional supplements or anything along those lines. So keep that in mind as well. Now, it's possible there's stuff in the pipeline. I'm just not aware of it. But I do want to mention, I'm not sure what kind of support Dr. Grordbort's Scientific Adventure Violence is going to receive in the future. So on a scale of 0 to 10, I give Dr. Grordbort's Scientific Adventure Violence a 7 out of 10. Like I said, I like it. I could have liked it a lot more. All right, that is it for this time out. If you like this video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell. It'll not only let you know when I share videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings right here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Central. And of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are not going to find here on the YouTube channel. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Thank you very much for watching. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. And until I see you next time, I certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.